if I say, okay, well, what if this was just a belay system? I say, this is just a belay system. Well, the belay system is rigged and we anticipate like the worst case scenario. Just as a planning factor, we aren't always operating in that worst case scenario. The worst case scenario being the belay compensated drop test, which turns into the ASTM standard, which turns into the NFPA 1983 standards for belay devices. The peak force on that was 15 kilonewtons, or I think 3,400 pounds. I think that's in that standard for NFPA. And so if we assume that our anchor system needs to be able to handle that peak impact force of a worst case scenario of 15 kilonewtons, but not only that, within a reasonable safety factor. So if we take 15 kilonewtons or 3,400 pounds and we apply like a 1.5 to 1 safety factor on that, that becomes 22 kilonewtons or 5,000 pounds. That seems like a reasonable number, especially if you look at OSHA, ANSI, ASSP standards and regulations. Anchorages are 5,000 pounds or 22 kilonewtons. So I think was that a coincidence? I don't know, but it seems reasonable. So what is a bomb-proof anchor, in my opinion, is any anchor system where you can operate a belay device or a belay system that's going to be at that 22 kilonewton braking strength or 5,000 pounds. In simplistic terms, well, let's talk about the components. Would you say that the components were bomb-proof? I'd say, yeah, of course the components are bomb-proof. If I build a belay system with a device that's manufactured, right, tested, and stamped, and I have a carabiner that's manufactured by a reputable source, and I use like software that's made and manufactured by a reputable source and has known braking strengths and characteristics and working load limits, I could say that, yeah, all the components that make up that belay system are bomb-proof. So the only thing I truly don't know for a fact maybe would be the anchor itself, but a certain amount of logic and reasoning goes a long way, and I could say, yeah, I'm pretty sure this, especially the base of this tree, can handle 5,000 pounds or 22 kilonewtons. Okay, the human element is when we say, oh, it's not bomb, it's the human element that plays into the factor, because we can defeat these devices by incorrectly operating them, and we can fail our system that way. We can maybe not even tie a right knot that just slips the material through, and that's a human error. It's not the material, it's us. So we are our own worst enemies. So again, bomb-proof anchor, any anchor that you think is going to be able to handle your worst case impact forces associated with a belay. Worst case defined as the belay competency drop tests, NFPA standards cite the ASTM standards, and it's peak force of about 15 kilonewtons. But we apply a 1.5 to 1 safety factor, we get 22 kilonewtons or 5,000 pounds. Okay, so if this is an anchor that I deem bomb-proof, can I operate not only my belay device, but can I also operate a working line, like a main line, off of the same anchor? Yes, you can. Because the working load is never going to see the potential peak forces that the belay system will see, but it's rigged out on the anchor. It's not like I add the force of the working load here plus the force of the worst case scenario to the belay and get a new number. It doesn't work that way. The belay only is under no tension, no force, unless this one fails, and then and only then do we see impact forces. That was in the context of single main, single belay, but what about a 2-tension rope system? So in theory, okay, like now you have both devices that are mirrored, they're dual capability, if they're being operated correctly to make it dual capable, and you're sharing the load, and you can say, yeah, if it's bomb-proof, absolutely, you're splitting the load in half, and then the belay forces would not be as high as like a single main, single belay. So yeah, absolutely, you could operate both of your 2-tension rope systems on a bomb-proof anchor. Now, substantial anchor. Okay, in a single main, single belay context, if I said that this anchor was substantial, meaning that I don't know or I don't have confidence that it could handle those impact forces on a belay line. Okay, that means that a substantial anchor is one that I can operate a single working line from, but I don't have confidence that it's strong enough to handle a belay system. That's in the single main, single belay context. Now, a substantial anchor in the 2-tension rope system context, what does that mean? Well, that's a big gray area, because if I operate a single working line, I have a certain amount of force, but if I share the force 50-50 on 2 working lines that are mirrored, 2-tension rope system, the force doesn't really change on the anchor. I'm just throwing all my eggs in one basket. And if one side fails, yeah, there could be some, if you want to call it an impact force or a rest force, but it's nowhere near the magnitude of a single belay system or having to absorb those impact forces. So, big gray area on a 2-tension rope system. What is a substantial anchor for a 2-tension rope system? Maybe it's where I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and I only want to operate half of my working load on one anchor and then the other half of my working load on the other anchor. But in a single main, single belay context, I can operate the entire working load on the substantial anchor. And my belay anchor needs to be bomb-proof. So that's how I delineate bomb-proof versus substantial. So marginal anchors combine to form substantial anchors, and then substantial anchors combine to form bomb-proof anchors. And marginal anchors are, in general, things that you just wouldn't want to put any part of your system solely on. So any working line that you have, you're not comfortable putting that working line, that one part. So usually marginal anchors we combine and groups of about 3 to 4 to be manageable. Anything beyond that, we do it in pairs. So if we want to take maybe 3 to 4 marginal anchors into one focus and then 3 to 4 marginal anchors into another focus, and from those 2 focuses, we bring those 2 in again to another one. So that's just how we build them. Here, I don't have the landscape that I want, but if this was in the recreational rock climbing context, this is just recreational rock pro. And so you could imagine that, okay, like I chose 4 places that were in distinct locations that weren't like part of it, and then I combined everything into a focus. This would be my substantial focus anchor point that I would put a working line, and then I have 4 as a general rule. Now, recreational rock pro depends on the types and the kinds. Some of these things will have a 22 kilonewton braking strength per piece of gear. Others will have like 15, some will say 10, 8, whatever. We don't really care. We're just arbitrarily going to derate any one piece down to 5 kilonewtons or 1,125 pounds. And that's to compensate for the variability in placement, the type, like if it's rock pro, the type of rock that we're putting it in, the interface between the piece of gear and that natural anchorage, and then the skill of the person putting the gear. So all those are variable and unknown, and if we just try to be a little bit on the safe side within reason and say that each piece of gear we put in is going to be, we're just going to say we can only trust it to about 5 kilonewtons. That means that if you multiply 5 by 4, you get 20 kilonewtons. So you could just arbitrarily, to make it simple, you say 4 pieces of like rock pro to make a substantial anchor would give you a 20 kilonewton substantial anchor in general. Let's revisit our bomb-proof, or what I deem bomb-proof tree anchor, and let's figure out how we can make our rope systems, not just the anchor, but everything else, bomb-proof in the sense of satisfying a lot of those anchor principles, like redundancy, for example. So, if I decide that a single sling of webbing around a tree was adequate strength to operate my system, that's my whiteboard analysis, it's my choosing. I can say, yeah, I can say, oh, the single strand is, or a single wrap is fine, or I can do like the whole wrap 2 pull 2s, wrap 3 pull 2s, or whatever. But let's look at the webbing here as we come around, just so you can kind of see a little more clearly. Okay, it's a long piece of webbing, and so we just did a frost variation of a water knot to make a basically I just tied a wrap 1 pull 1 around this tree, and it's a single sling. I just made a single sling for this anchor. And then I had excess, and I did the same thing down here, so it's a single sling for the other device down here. So each one of these devices are independent, they're on their own single sling. This is perfectly fine. There's a faster way to do it. But if I decided to this was a bomb-proof anchor and I decided to operate both of my systems on the one strand, I'd say that as far as redundancy, I'm not there. I would not be happy with this setup because all my eggs are in one basket on this one sling, so I'd want to separate that out. I could separate it out completely, or I could just tie 2 slings and have everything hooked into all the slings together. And so what that looks like is just taking, I just did 2 slings, 2 carabiners, 2 devices, so that everything is interlinked and intertwined, and I could probably get away with this. And this will be just fine too. Okay, so I have 2 wrap one, pull ones, going to 2 carabiners, going to their separate devices, and I would feel comfortable that now that this would definitely be a little bit more secure, more bomb-proof like. I just have to make sure that my slings were of the same length, because now this is a little bit loose because I tied this one a little bit tighter than this one, so that's a con to doing it this way. But if you got it right, you can now say that 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 4 strands. The knots are on the back side of the tree, so they're at the place where they're going to see the least amount of tension, and so this would be pretty bomber. Is there a faster way to do this with just a single piece of webbing? And yes, there is. So got a long piece of webbing here, and I found the midpoint, and I just tied it into an overhand. This is my skeleton water knot, and I'm going to do basically this is called a redundant wrap 2 pull 2. So fold it into a bite. I'm basically doing a single wrap around the tree, but with 2 strands. When I come around with these strands, again, the frost variation of the water knot, I fold this into a bite. But when I fold this into a bite, I'm actually like creating like 4 strands. So it's a pretty big knot, but I give myself enough tail to complete it all the way around. And what I've just done is made 2 separate slings of the exact same diameter around the tree, completely redundant. So if I rotate this knot around to the back side of it where it sees the least amount of tension, I have a redundant wrap 2 pull 2. So if I cut this strand here, it's not like in theory like a wrap 3 pull 2 or a wrap 2 pull 1 where it's all interlinked to this one and it'll all loosen up. This is completely independent of this. Even though they share the same knot, they're 2 separate slings that I tie together with just 1 knot. So a redundant wrap 2 pull 2. And now I can use this. I only tied 1 knot, and they're both the exact same length, so they both will share that load. And I can operate both of my systems off of this sling if I decide that this was strong enough. In this case, I decided that yes, it was. So a redundant wrap 2 pull 2. And I operate my maestros or my devices right here. Anchor plates are great. If we want a shark fin or twin stick something, if you got clutches, cool. Carabiners are my favorite. So in this application I have devices, and I'm gonna figure out, is this bomber as far as redundancy in my system? Like, are all my eggs in one basket? Like, am I missing something? So let's figure it out. Okay, a redundant wrap 2 pull 2, which I deem was perfectly acceptable, to a single carabiner, to a single anchor plate, and then each system has its own device with its own carabiner. So let's figure out what's acceptable and what's not in general. Okay, do I need to double up anchor plates to make it redundant by stacking them in like that? The answer is no, you don't need to do that. These are the exceptions. And the reason why, the rationale behind why you don't need to do double on things like this is because there's no moving parts, so it can't really be manipulated. It's just a solid piece of thing. And so this is the exception to the rule. So the anchor plate's plenty fine. Now the carabiner can be manipulated. And so in this case, you would not want to just use 1 carabiner, but you'd want to stack them. You stack them on an anchor plate like this. I could argue that I am good to go. So a bomb-proof anchor, redundant components, and I can operate a single main separate belay or a 2-tension rope system off of this and be just fine. Let's talk about 2-point anchors. Now, I'm operating both devices at a single focus. So this single focus I'm going to deem as bomb-proof. And so let's look at our redundancy. We have one system on one device with a carabiner to a bomb-proof anchor plate that I only need one of. And then we have dual carabiners on that anchor plate because the other system has its own setup. So at least from here to here, I'd say, yeah, this is redundant. This checks out. I'm okay with what I have going on here. Okay, so let's look at 2-point anchors. And let's back it up and really, like, why do I build 2-point anchors? To simplify things, there's two main reasons why I would build a 2-point anchor or multi-point, but we'll just keep it simple and say 2-point. One is based on strength, where I don't have confidence that one single anchor point will do. And the other reason is based on alignment. My direction of pull, or the projected load line, doesn't sit on a path that's favorable for just one anchor point. So I have to bring things together into an ideal alignment. So in this case, I'm going to say that this focus is bomb-proof because I'm going to bring two trees together that I think aren't bomb-proof on their own, but they could be substantial. So I'm going to bring two substantial anchor points together into a focus, and I'm going to call this focus bomb-proof. Okay, so we know that this checks out on the front end. The knot's just an overhand, a BFK. So the rope itself, plenty strong. One strand will be fine for this because this is the same life safety rope we're going to use for our actual rescue systems. And my angle is fine, all that checks out. And now let's go back to our anchor points. So I'm operating a single main, single belay, let's just say single main, single belay, bomb-proof system up front. And here, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. Now you have two strands going here. However, these two strands aren't isolated. So if I lose one, in theory, I lose the other. And so there's no redundancy here. There's definitely no redundancy here or here because I would need to double it up. Since I'm putting all my eggs in one basket at the system, I would actually have to do a separate sling around the tree with its own separate carabiner. So I've covered my bases on the anchor point itself, but I still haven't addressed this problem right here. A fast way to address that problem, it's an option. It's probably not what I would go to, but you could just isolate it. And here I'm just going to do like a quick knot for simplicity. Probably a figure 8 would be better, or a bowline. And I'd still have to put both my carabiners into that loop. And you could say that, okay, now I've isolated each strand. So if this strand fails, this one doesn't because it's knotted here. So this would be acceptable. Same thing for the other tree. Let's take a look at the other tree. So same thing here. Okay, I used webbing. I would have to figure out how to isolate these strands by separating them out, figure 8, overhand, bowline, whatever. It all will work just fine. So now I've covered my bases and I can operate a 2-rope system. Whether that's single main, single belay, or a 2-tension rope system, doesn't matter. I can operate everything just like that, and I'm fully redundant and ready to go. And I've covered all my bases. Okay, let's do a more streamlined and efficient way to rig a 2-point anchor with our ropes this way without having to use webbing, a bunch of carabiners, or anything like that. So here we're just going to use rope and nothing else to make a 2-point load sharing bomb-proof anchor system where we're going to operate both rope systems at the same point in space. Whether that's single main, single belay, or 2-tension rope system, who cares? We're going to make it all bomb-proof just with the rope. I have my rope laid out. It's life safety rope. I take the 2 terminal ends and I go to my substantial anchor, in this case a small diameter tree, and I'm going to create an anchor just with one knot. I'm just going to make these 2 rope ends one and treat this as if it was just one rope. Okay, so in this case, it's just a simple bowline. And since I don't have anything else going off of the tails, I just do a Yosemite retrace and call it good. So that's one. So now what I have is two strands that are isolated. So for the redundancy factor, even though one is plenty strong, now we have two, so if something did happen to this, we wouldn't pendulum on the other anchor. So that's one side. Let's go to the other. Based on the angles that I want to operate at, I'm going to probably equalize it somewhere back in here, and then I take the bite maybe somewhere along approximately the midpoint of the rope over, do the same thing. And we retrace. And we bring this one back. So now I have two completely redundant strands. I bring them to wherever I want to operate my focus, and then I tie my BFK. So bring this into a focus. This is going to be a pretty big knot. Pull some stretch out, fold this over on itself. It's going to be something like that. And I'll just do an overhand since it's really big. Pull all that through. Pull every strand coming out, make sure it's taut and tight. Okay, and now I have two strands, so if I lose one, it doesn't pendulum, and same thing on the opposite side.